Okay, so we are going to get started as folks continue to join us. Good evening, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition Power Not Paranoia webinar series part 3. This is a series of our police state and community health in times of COVID. And today, we will be, our primary discussion is going to be about police state and gender and sexuality. My name is Hamid. I'm one of the organizers with Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. And before I go into the introductions, I just want to very quickly, because of a whole lot of issues around Zoom bombing, I guess there's a new term now, and a whole lot of disruptions that have happened as a result of just what we have been seeing. And we have tried in earnest to look at other platforms. We look at Jitsi, we looked at Mumble, we looked at some other. And the problem is that Mumble is an audio only. So what we decided that if it's going to be a strategic conversation, then we will have it on Mumble because that's encrypted. And Jitsi for more than 5 participants becomes really, really, really slow and becomes a problem. So I think so we have looked at other pieces. So I think Zoom seems to be up until now the best way to do is to how do we protect ourselves? How do we protect the information? How do we prevent this from being disrupted? So what we have done is that we are going to, and I hate to do this, I mean, we're a police abolitionist work, so we don't want to be policing people, but we'll have to control the mute, unmute. And we're going to keep everyone muted. We're also going to have to control the screen shares. So things, because that has happened, things have popped up on the screen, unwanted things. And so myself and my co-host Jamie Garcia will be sort of like monitoring all of this. And then at any moment, if we see anything pop up, because there's been some deep sort of racist attacks on Zoom as well, and some others too, homophobic and racist and other things. So as soon as we see that, we will stop the meeting and see where we are from there. So that's okay. And we're also recording the meeting too, because people have been requesting us. So this recording will be uploaded onto the website in the next few days. So with that, I'm going to invite my co-host Jamie Garcia if you want to say a few things for today's webinar.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie. I'm with Stop LAPD Spying Coalition as well. I just want to say that I'm going to be keeping an eye on the chat room. So if you have questions or you want folks to pause, I'm going to take your name down and kind of work with Hamid to make sure we get your question and comment in. And I'm a little slow with tech, but I am going to do my best to keep up with everybody. So, and then also there's a raise your hand tab or thing that you can push as well. So I think Hamid normally calls out if folks want to raise their hand, and I'll switch over to be able to see that. But for right now, I'm going to be monitoring the chat room just so that if questions get asked, I can make sure I lift those questions, and then maybe we can even unmute people so that you can ask the question yourself. So, but I'll be working with Hamid, and Hamid, you let me know how we want to navigate the raising your hand in the chat room. And I'm looking forward to talking today.
Sure. And the other option also is that please, if folks have a question, go ahead and type it in the chat room. That's a group chat for everybody. And if you're on the phone and if you're not on a laptop or a computer, please text us a question too. And the number you can text that at is 562-230-4578. Again, 562-230-4578. And one of our other guests, Ash, is that Ash R from Swap? So I'm gonna, so try to unmute yourself, Ash. See if you can unmute. Let's try it again, Ash, because I had unmuted you. Okay, there you go.
Hi, I'm Ash, but I'm not from Swap.
Oh, okay. Sorry for that.
It's okay. Just want to let you know.
Well, because West has said that it was going to be Ash, so I wasn't sure. Sorry for that. Okay, so we'll go right ahead, and our guests are Chella and Miche and West, and we'll keep on joining folks. So Chella, go ahead. Do you want to quickly introduce yourself? Try to unmute yourself. Okay.
Okay, thank you. The reason I muted myself, y'all, is because I live in Skid Row and it's like super siren-y here. Okay, so my name is Chella. I've been an organizer with Stop LAPD Spying for the last 6 or 7 years. I've been doing activist and organizing work and standing up for trans women, especially trans women in Skid Row and those most impacted against community and state violence, which is all state violence, for the last 8 or 9 years. My pronouns are she and they, interchangeably, and I would love to introduce our guests today. We have Miche, who is an amazing activist. She's been doing a lot of work with Trans Latina Coalition, which is a Latina-based trans org and collective in Los Angeles, doing amazing work with trans women, specifically trans Latina women who are undocumented. Everything from policy, everything from policy to education. And she's also with Black and Pink. Go ahead and Miche and say hi to everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Yeah, my name is Miche. I use she, her, they, them pronouns. Thank you, Chella.
You're welcome. And we have West, who's been organizing with SWAP for quite a few years. I remember they were doing stuff like 5 years ago when I met them. SWAP is Sex Workers Outreach Project LA, which seeks to pretty much provide advocacy for sex workers, all sex workers, right? Because sex workers' rights are human rights. So go ahead, West, and say your name and anything you want to say.
Hey everyone, thanks Chella. I'm West. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the co-director of SWAP LA, and I've also worked in like the anti-human trafficking, like nonprofit world to a lesser extent over the years. Really happy to be here with you both, Chella and Miche.
Okay.
Great.
Well, yes. Thank you, Hamid.
Thank you, thank you. So, well, let's get right into it. We know that obviously right now these are pretty surreal times, and there's a whole pandemic out there, and it's a global health emergency. But of course, as we are constantly reminded by our comrade Jamie Garcia, who's on the front line of healthcare, that public health has always been in crisis. So what else is new? I mean, particularly based out of Skid Row and our communities. So this crisis has been, it's hitting in different quarters. So all of a sudden, but yet at the same time, it is a crisis. So it is real as well. So how do we look at this? But I think trying to understand this is also the time where the police state really expands its power, the police state expands its authority, the police state expands its tactics, and communities that have been throughout been some of the most vulnerable or marginalized communities continue to bear the brunt as well. So maybe a question to get started to all three of you, and just no turn, and whoever wants to start off first. That just help us sort of understand, like what was the landscape of your work and the oppression that's been prior to COVID-19. So we want to desensationalize this moment as well, because life is real and this has been going on forever. So whoever wants to get started.
I can go first. So there's this statement that says every 32 hours a trans woman is murdered, and in particular a trans woman of color, and more in particular a Black trans woman. So first we're looking at the violences that trans Black women experience specifically, as well as the trans and GNC, gender nonconforming community as a whole that we've been experiencing. And in the last 4 years, there have been a lot of policies and a lot of violences against us. Like last year and 2018 were the deadliest year for Black trans women. It was every other week we saw a Black trans woman get murdered, as well as the economic crisis that's going on with us, right? Where we are forced to basically do, what's considered illegal things to survive. And I think from attention to it, and also like to upset things, Hello?
Yeah.
Y'all there?
You're
Okay.
good. We can hear you.
Okay. Something happened to my phone and I thought it was gonna shut down again. Okay. And so like I think it's, this has been, it's crazy because a lot of people have, a lot of trans women in particular, have been biting their nails and getting ready to like, something's gonna happen. And so when COVID-19 happened, the outbreak happened, it was like, wow, like a lot of unsheltered trans women are still out there, And yeah, I think my work, and in my work, I'd like to bring awareness and also solve this problem. So that's, yeah. What about you? Anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah.
Miche?
Yeah. I think just a lot of the things that trans, gender nonconforming folks, especially those that are of color, like Black and brown folks, a lot of the issues that are faced by us on a daily basis have only been exacerbated by COVID-19. So when we think about things like shelter and things like houselessness, and when we think about demanding for folks to stay inside, a lot of the time trans folks can't find a safe place to live, especially in the city of Los Angeles. Most shelters push out trans folks because of physical and sexual violence. Most transitional living programs are like too short to even create a real pathway for folks to create permanent housing. And most folks are seen as unemployable by the system. So all of these like societal barriers that have been like built up and have been preventing our people from really reaching a level of financial stability or stability have even gotten worse now that there are no job opportunities, like every shelter is kind of packed. And so like for our center, for Trans Latina, like our space is kind of one of the few trans-led spaces in the city that folks had access to. And so when it was said that essential businesses had to close, all of these things, like we really chose to keep our doors open. And we get so many folks still coming in for food, still coming in looking for housing, and really struggling with this moment because there are no other organizations and there are no other spaces that are looking out for them and looking out for us. And so all of that has kind of just gotten worse. And so a lot of the work that I've been focused on recently is just demanding like a level of accountability from like the state around like negligence that's happened to trans folks, and kind of demanding resource allocation to allow our community like to really build the infrastructure that we need to survive. And so we've been met with now like, oh, we can't give money specifically to trans people, especially now because we're going to be using all this money for coronavirus stuff. But it's like, no, now more than ever, like we need to really emphasize on folks that are like, that have specific barriers to access and are facing much more marginalization and oppression and shit like that. And so, yeah, it's just been like really, really, like I said, it's just been like hitting hard on our people. And so, a lot of the time folks aren't able to do these like shelter in place things, are still doing sex work, are still looking for housing and having to put their lives at risk. And especially for folks that are like in jails, prisons, and detention centers, like one, like they're kind of forced not to be able to social distance and kind of forced to not be able to take precautions to really protect their health. And so one, before COVID, like folks were really met with physical and sexual violence in the jail and detention like settings and in prisons and shit like that. And so now they got to worry about that, plus like potentially catching a deadly virus that the state most likely won't care for if they do catch it. And so it's just been like a bunch of barriers that folks have been facing and a bunch of shit that folks have been facing that we're trying to be able to help people through. But I would say, yeah, like Chella said, I think folks like, you know, like the lack of resources there, the lack of like real investment in our people, like all of that has set us up to kind of like really struggle in this moment. And so I think it's really important, and thank y'all for putting together a specific like session to talk about like these things, because I think often everyone's in like survival mode, emergency response mode, and a lot of the time don't remember to bring trans folks along with them. And so thank you. But yeah, that's all I have to say on that part.
Thank you. Thank you. West, any thoughts?
Yeah, my only thoughts to what you just said, both of you said, is that it's gonna be through all of these communities that like are serving people in the sex industry, like just by virtue of reaching out to like, you know, at-risk people or, you know, historically marginalized communities already. So funding for like trans-led care and stuff like that is like the sort of like the game plan that like I have for like our organization to support sex workers practically, is to like try to help like Miche, like you folks get your funding, that sort of thing is going to serve our people. And then I guess just like the historical background with sex workers being targeted for data, and just a lot of times that's been happening under these like national human trafficking data collection programs that are like mega funded. And that basically captures a lot of like petty crimes and sort of exacerbates the all the fallout from having a criminal record that people in the sex industry are experiencing, that like, you know, perpetuates their engagement like in the sex industry with like less protections, things like that. So that's sort of like the precedent for sex workers to really get captured and targeted by big data. And so any sort of like aid or service or like emergency relief funding that we might try to pursue through like whatever, like the state or something, the way that that's distributed and all of those questions are really, really high key for the sex worker population. So that's like the biggest concern that I have right now, just for our organization. Like, how can we actually get support for sex workers in a way that isn't going to like further target them with like data collection that is such a part of like anti-human trafficking work nationally already.
Thank you. So while we're on that, West, and maybe just kind of go back, and this is a question for all three of you as well. And of course, our goal here on these webinars is to build power and not paranoia. But I think the thing being that you know, but what are the fears at this moment that in your in the SWAP and sex worker outreach project, and the same for Miche and Chella as well. So West, what are some of the fears that are being exhibited in the sex workers community that you see?
I don't really know if I can answer the question. I'm kind of just here to listen more. Miche, do you have any thoughts?
In terms of the fears, I think that there's a lot of, like I said, I think that there's a lot of movement happening in terms of organizing, in terms of both like on community and both in the state having like emergency planning and emergency responses to the situation. And I think like for us, a huge fear has been for trans folks to be included in those dialogue and in those movements. And so specifically when we're talking about like decarceration, when we're talking about building shelters for folks, when we're talking about providing like a financial assistance, like really being able to emphasize that our folks are really struggling and not to say that everyone isn't struggling right now, but really acknowledging like what, like the oppression and the barriers that are tied to our genders, like how that like has really exacerbated the issues that we are facing in this moment. I would say like that's a huge fear of ours right now. There have been like a couple of like, and I want to uplift like her because she was like a huge community leader in New York. Her name was Lorena Bojas, and she passed from coronavirus last week. And she, you know, she was still providing outreach to folks on the streets, like really supporting community that no other organizations or no state response was like supporting, you know? And so for us, like we are also in emergency mode and trying to support our people. And many times like trans folks have many health issues, you know? We have our folks a lot of the time um, like have HIV, have other sort of health issues, you know? And so that really makes us more susceptible to coronavirus. And so if we don't have a place we can stay, if we're forced to take care of our people on the streets when no one else is, like we historically have, you know, in this moment, it doesn't allow us to really take care of ourselves. And so one of my biggest fears is that so many of my people are going to be lost to this virus, you know? And so we're seeing that already. And I think like if there's opportunities for other folks to help us in supporting others, and like if that means like housing people, if that means like providing financial assistance to people, if that like whatever kind of support, or at least keeping us in those conversations as folks that are really like being impacted right now also, I think that's super important. But I would say like those are two biggest fears I would want to uplift in this moment. Yeah, and I think also like I think like I think also a fear that folks have been like talking about is just, you know, us returning to like normalcy and nothing really changing. And so like us kind of like like a large portion of our community being wiped out, you know, and like that not even being mentioned. And then when this whole thing kind of subsides and the curve is flattened or whatever, like still not even acknowledging or recognizing like that trans folks like positionality in the world is still like very, very like low. Like there's so much stigma, you know? And so I think like when things blow over, like still no investment in our community or no acknowledgement that, or like nothing really changes, like that's such a fear of mine, because it's like, you know, folks like really were impacted by the stuff and then nothing was really like nothing's changing. So I think right now like there's a moment to really like uplift a lot of the things that folks are facing, because it is so like deep right now. And so yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you. Chella?
I would like to also add, Miche, you said it brilliantly around like the intersectionality of being, having a lot of like health issues and being trans, especially if you're an elder. So I just being honest, I've seen a lot of my friends, and I've posted as well, who are trans men and trans women, also posting around like health, right? Like having hypertension, having high blood pressure, having diabetes, or even having HIV, right? And being infected with those things. And I'm sorry that I'm a little emotional right now, but yeah, it's those things, right? I also think, you know, a lot of folks who've had to live with, and this is also something cis women have to deal with as well. I think living with their abusive partner and being in an abusive situation where there's not a way out, right? And I think there's an overwhelmingly number of trans women who are having to boo up with their abusers right now. And also, you know, folks who are, you know, engaging in other types of drugs that are not just weed, right? Like, folks are getting scared, especially in Skid Row, like, because cops are like, I'm gonna be real, like, I can't. One of my neighbors died last night, and she wasn't a trans woman, but it was like, wow, I don't know if it was COVID, you know, we don't know what it was, but these things are super, you know, super, you know, it's super in our community, as well as the criminalizing fact, right? Like, if you're homeless right now, they're like taking people's tents. They are still taking people's tents, y'all. They are still out there criminalizing the poor and criminalizing houseless folks. So if you're a trans Black woman, if you're an undocumented brown person or a GNC person, it's exacerbated. There was this thing that said it's a horror on top of a horror. And yes, I don't want to be a paranoia or fear, but these things are real, you know. But yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Chella. I just want to remind folks that we're going to keep folks, besides our guests over here, Chella, Miche, and West, and my co-host Jamie, unmuted, but we were going to open it up in about 15, 20 minutes. But if folks have any questions in the meantime or comments, the chat room is open. So please go ahead and type your questions in there. In case if you are on the phone, you can also text us your comment or your question as well to 562-230-4578, 562-230-4578. You know, we've been hearing a lot about mutual aid, and you know, just amazing mutual aid, and people have been out there. And I know, West, last week when we were on the webinars, you were talking about that swap, you know, just hooking up with the ground game, and there's been a process of trying to create mutual aid. But I think hearing some of the comments, I want to ask, like, in this particular instance, with the unique needs that community has, the trans community, the sex workers community, the undocumented community, and then, so what kind of blind spots do you see in that mutual aid? What do you see that needs to be elevated and needs to be highlighted so it is going across to everybody and it's being accessible? So what are some of the blind spots?
Can I jump in there?
Please.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, like within like 72 hours of launching the emergency relief fund that Swap LA put together, we had like fucking like 50 applicants. Like, most people had like really immediate needs. A lot of people had dependents, a lot of immunocompromised people. And we tried to create like sort of a triage, like priority system to distribute funds like as fast as we could. Like, it's just hard to make those decisions. But one of the biggest issues is that we set aside 20% of like all of the funds raised to be distributed like directly to street-based workers, and then the remainder was like done via Venmo through like the online application process and all of that. But to actually distribute these cash funds to like street-based workers, we can't really use our normal like strategy, like when we do our outreach strolls, just like having peers that are trained to do outreach, like, and how to negotiate and like just deal with all of it on the street. But we I don't know, we have to be creative. We have to like partner with like some public health allies, not public health, but like organizations that we're like allies with, like to go with their outreach teams. I don't know. We're just like still figuring all that out. Even though we have like money set aside for street-based workers, and we're continuing to raise more money. So that's just like a practical concern, but it also reflects like the larger issue of if people are working right now on the street, or like where people are moving their work. We kind of just like need that intel as well.
Mm-hmm.
It seems sorry, just like last thought, it seems like
no.
there's been a really obvious shift to online work right now. A lot of people are moving into like camming and stuff like that were otherwise doing like in person full service kind of work. So there's like kind of a higher demand for that, but there's also like a flooding of that work pool. So that's expected to be happening right now. But Chella, what were you gonna say?
Yeah.
Okay, so I know from my comrades who actually never engaged in like internet work, internet sex work, who've always done, like you said, street-based work, or they have their regulars, right? I mean, they're still in it, and they're talking about being scared that their Johns or their clients that they see won't be coming back, and I know that there's a lot of fear for them to like out themselves, especially because a lot of them are older. I know, especially the trans women I know are older and a little bit more. They quote unquote view themselves as respectable, and that's real, and so I do want to say that on that end, I think a blind spot that I've seen, and I'm going to be honest, I've applied for some of these mutual aid funds, is the fact that it's all online, right? Like right now, not everyone is plugged in. We have to remember that there's a community that is not plugged into the internet. I'm going to be completely honest and say the other day I woke up to a lot of money being in my account. The first thing I did was send trans Black and trans women of color that I know that are online money. And then I went to the people that I know don't have money. I was like, hey, I'm going to go to this place right now. Like, there's a street store across the street. They have a debit card thing, and I got money out, and I gave it to them. Or I was like, hey, do you have a friend that you were close with that I can send them Venmo and they can get it out for you? And I did it that way. And I know that requires a little bit more footwork than we're able to do right now, but it's needed. Like, not everyone is plugged in, and we got to realize that. And I hate to say it like that, but that's one that I've seen. Another thing, just being honest, and maybe this has to do with like communication levels, right? Our folks are still not getting nutritious food, right? Like the shit that they're giving us, like it's still the same shit I would get, when if I was, just not quarantining myself, So I think health concerns, I think nutritious food is a blind spot. I think who has access is a blind spot. I also think location, right? Skid Row has a lot of places that give food out, but right now we just saw that one of them had a case of COVID-19, the first case in Skid Row a few days ago. So I think those are blind spots. I think looking at where things are needed most, and also thinking about how to get it to the people that are most isolated, right? It's definitely a blind spot. Yeah. Miche, do you have anything to say?
Now I would say y'all got a lot of good points. Like, folks on the streets or folks that are hustling, like, aren't checking their Facebook or Instagrams for all these mutual aid funds. And so a lot of the time, those folks are slipping through the cracks. And I think, like, for a lot of our folks, like, yes, are doing like sex work, but a lot of the time are just involved in like nightlife, from like before this all went down. Like our entertainers work in the gig economy, and so are like being really impacted by this moment. And I don't know if there's a lot of like funds that people can apply for, you know. There was this one that was specific for queer and trans Black and Indigenous people of color that came up by this person named Amita. And they raised like almost, I didn't check, but the last time they raised like $150,000 to be able to like disperse to specifically like queer and trans, Black and Indigenous people of color across the country. And that was like one of the few that I knew that was specific to our folks. And there have been a couple different like popping around, but a lot of the time, like they're also like, I think like something that I'm constantly thinking about more and more now is just like language justice. And a lot of the time, like the folks who have access to it too, a lot of them are in English and not in Spanish or other languages. And so I think being able to have access, if you are going to do one of those, is really important. And I think, like Chella said, like it's not also just financial. Like I think having access to food is an effort that's much needed. But something that I've been doing personally is I've been making I learned how to make fabric masks, and like I include filters in them and stuff, and I've been giving them to like my folks and people in my circle at least now. But I think like widespread distribution to our folks of like those things, to like if we can't get folks housing now, or if we can't, like if that's like not realistic for some people, thinking about like how are other ways we can keep people protected, like with the mask or like with some gloves or like with some food, you know. And so I would say like those types of things are especially needed as well. But definitely the piece about language and for folks that don't have access to online platforms.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Jamie, do you, and I see that folks are also posting comments as well. And I wanted to actually um, ask that follow-up question that GJLA is lifting like too many hoops for trans folks to get funds. Because there are rapid response funds out there, but seems like there are too many hoops for trans folks to get funds. But let's maybe we can look at that. But before we go there, Jamie, do you have any comments or questions up until now? So that we have some folks on the chat room that they have a couple comments.
Yeah, do you want me just to read them right now?
Well, I mean,
So-
there's one about where, yeah, one
Okay,
about,
so
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so Gladys has commented a few times and is also, you know, and I think that those questions are being asked about what exactly, you know, can be done. And I really appreciate what has been the conversation that's happening, because I think it's pointing us to very specific need in this moment right now, where, you know, we are being told to self-quarantine, to self-isolate if you can. And then there's the challenges just to that. But what we see with mutual aid is actually the need to bring us together, the need to actually go out and to reach to people. So I really appreciate what Gladys was asking, because we were able to really address that. And then there was also a link for resources in Spanish that was just uploaded, and there's a link there too. But that's so far is what's been in the chat room, Hamid.
Okay. I'm going to also invite, I guess Isaac is also on the line with Gender Justice LA. Isaac, I just unmuted you, so I just wanted to open it up to see if you have any comments up until now as what you've been hearing, and particularly the GJLA members, how they've been impacted.
Yes. Hello, everybody. This is Isaac. Had to mute because I have dogs that are barking a lot. Yeah, and I joined probably about 10 minutes in, so I'm just really, I'm not sure if you already talked about it, but thinking about like disabled folks and, you know, trans youth at this moment, and just wondering if there's been any conversations around those particular groups of people.
No, please go ahead. Speak about the impact on trans youth, particularly.
Yeah, well, I've been, you know, touching base with our folks in Gender Justice LA, and a lot of the issues around, everything from being in unsafe housing, like suicidal ideation, maxed up, not having space in houses that are, they're able to have private conversations. A lot of our youth aren't necessarily out as trans, and so getting them those resources has been a barrier. Yeah, so and I'm also thinking about like the rapid responses funding that's out there, and as someone who's like writing a grant every day to just try to get those funds reallocated, it's just saying the same old story of why trans people need access to these funds, when I don't even think we need to be having that conversation anymore. I think it's really larger organizations, larger LGBT or supposedly allied organizations should be directly funneling and reaching out to trans-led organizations, and collectives, and people who have access to folks on the ground. So I do think that I've personally, haven't gotten much emails of, except from other trans folks and trans-led organizations, like, offering any kind of support. And I think that's a problem when you're not actually reaching out to the people who are working with trans-led organizations, or and not offering just like, hey, what do you need? I think that's a big problem. No one's really reaching out on that level. So I think that's an issue. Yeah. Anyways, I'll stop there.
Okay. No, thank you so much, Isaac. And yeah. So maybe we'll open it up for everyone else. But before we go there, maybe just one quickly, one more question that comes to mind, that that right now there are some policies that are also in motion as well that'll further make communities extremely vulnerable. And one of them is also on a federal level. It's called the Earn It Bill, EARN, and then IT. The bill, which is basically under the guise of child pornography and child trafficking, is really an assault on backdoor encryption and various other things. And we know, particularly in the sex workers community, the previous bills have had some pretty dire impacts similarly as well. So I want to open it up to see whether either one of you, West and Miche and Chella, so all three of you taking turns, like if you want to make a comment and let us know where that is, and what sort of organizing is going on, and how can we, I know that the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition is in the mix, and we've been working with folks back east and then on a national level too. But if you want to talk about it real quickly, that'd be super helpful to inform folks. Wes, do you want to start off?
Sure. I mean, Chella, you were on that call too. About
yes, I was.
Yeah, would you talk about like what the national response is? We're kind of just taking our lead from them.
I mean, to be honest, I forgot about it. I think right now we are just trying to get the word out and get as much people power as we can, because it's still in the Senate, right? It hasn't even been it got passed through one level. Now it's got to make it to the other level, I think. And it's the same people that created the Sesta-Foster Act, which pretty much criminalized, the way that people do sex work. And it was a way that the wording was targeting, quote unquote, sex, slavery pretty much. But yeah, it actually was a way for them to get sex workers who consensually get into sex work. And so I think it's the same authors. So the thing is just education and power. And so just educating more people about it. We had one call. I know there was going to be another call soon. And I know that they're also like doing like an email thing. If folks want to get involved with that, I can send them the email of the folks that are a part of that fight. But yeah, that's what I remember. Just being honest.
Okay.
Do you remember anything else, Wes?
Yeah, that was basically it. But I can at least report back that like I'm on this statewide monthly call of all these human trafficking organizations. It's like a policy call. It's led by CAST LA, and they're the biggest human trafficking agency in the country, realistically here in LA. So like they're pretty sympathetic to giving us. They always give us a platform to like reach out to the people on that network and like, you know, ask people individually to oppose or support whatever legislation. But we don't expect CAST LA to like oppose the Earn It bill, even though it's like in their purview as like a child exploitation intended bill, right? But they're not going to oppose it. But they have offered to like I've already shared some information with the network, and I'll do it on the next monthly call too. That has a pretty broad reach of like human trafficking professionals and just people. So we can at least build a broader coalition of opposition.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly an issue of massive data collection. So Miche, please go ahead, and also if we want to talk about particularly in the immigrant community as well, the trans immigrant population, as to what are some of the additional, I know that it's been back and forth with ICE raids and other things too, but if there are some other policies that you feel that we should be flagging as well at this time.
Yeah, to be transparent, I hadn't heard about the Earn It like bill, so I'm glad that I was able to learn about it now. And Chella, if you're down to add me to those emails and stuff, I would love to be able to be a part of that work and the opposition public education for that. I think like right now there's just a lot of movement. Specifically around like the Free Them All campaigns and end trans detention to really get trans women out of immigration detention. Right now, we're specifically working to get this woman named Kelly, who's been in immigration detention for 2 years now, and they keep denying her parole under the guise that she's like a threat to public safety. And she has like several different health conditions, like she's diabetic, she need specific like nutritional needs, and they're not providing those things. And so her and a lot of other trans women that we've been supporting in front of immigration detention are really like calling for them to be like released for their own lives, because there is a couple of the guards have tested positive for coronavirus, and so a lot of folks are really just afraid that if they do catch it, ICE really isn't going to do shit about it. And so right now there's a lot of movement to get folks out. And so that's one of the main like national things that's happening for undocumented trans women and trans folks. And then I just also want to note that like, you know, there's like a lot of these like conversations happening around like this like federal stimulus package, and like how folks are going to be able to get some sort of like money from the government. I think it's like about $1,200, but like many folks, especially undocumented folks, aren't going to have access to that money. And so just acknowledging like again, like that makes like these mutual aid like for folks like really even more important. So yeah, that's the piece I would add to that. And yeah.
Miche, could you repeat that last sentence?
Yeah, if maybe somebody's mic is open has some background music going on, so it's just a...
Baba, my neighbor is playing music, so can I mute myself just for a minute?
Yeah, no worries, Chella. Sure.
I said that like a lot of folks are talking and have questions about like this like federal stimulus package that's gonna like trickle money down, which is like like very little money, but also like a lot of undocumented folks aren't gonna have access to that money. So I was just uplifting that as like another reason why like mutual aid specifically for folks like in Spanish and for folks that are undocumented are especially important. And folks that comrades in the chat box linked to things that I was referencing. So like the fights to get trans folks and queer and trans folks out of detention. There's an article that GGLA linked, and then Jessica linked the petition that we have for Kelly that's in detention right now. And so, yeah.
Great. Excellent. So I think before we, Jamie, do you have any questions from yourself or any comment up until now before we unmute it, and we'll go to the other question about how other folks can help. But any comments? What you've been hearing?
I think for me, it goes back to a lot of not only organizing, and I really appreciate the fact that we need to call in larger organizations right now that are not thinking about distribution of funds and access to funds and how those funds are being distributed is very key right now, because that is how other groups remain unseen. I think the other thing, just as being a healthcare worker in acute setting in a hospital, I think one of the things that's becoming more and more, that I'm hearing more frequently, is the need for us to not necessarily return back to the streets, but in some ways very much so return back to the streets, because so many of our people who do not have homes, who livelihoods were dependent on being able to interact and engage with people actively in the open, on the streets, has now been taken away. And I think for that, again, thinking about these safe ways that we are being able to engage with each other again, to provide food, to provide, tents, to provide masks, I'm hearing and to provide funds is, again, and I know that there's mutual aid groups that are happening, and I'm thinking, how much more can we do, and can we facilitate this to happen to especially Black trans community? So that's been, something that I'm hearing a lot, and I appreciate that it's being raised here, and especially being raised in the context of who has the funds that could actually help to facilitate this amongst organizations that are ready to be on the ground, that know where folks are, that want to be able to distribute these resources. So I think that was something that was very, very important to hear. And also, I think, I'm just appreciating this, and I'd like to hear more about this, again, looking at data exchange, data sharing, and how, in some senses, how we're going to become more what they call seen in a sense through data, through the process of being COVID positive or COVID negative. Because right now, the lack of testing that is not happening, right? They want to kind of increase that, but I'm glad that folks from the migrant community we're speaking to and talking to right now, because one of my biggest concerns are what happens when the state starts to try to make everybody visible by saying, have you built an immunity? Are you COVID positive? Are you COVID negative? And what is it going to do to movement on the street? So that's been another one of my big questions, is that now, knowing that right-wing organizations that are going to start funneling solutions to the administration about how to make us all return back, one of the biggest things that they're touching on is basically making us visible, and basically almost like giving us a certificate of authentication, whether you are immune to COVID now, whether it is that you're recovered from it, whether it is that you got vaccination, whether it is that you're young and you're healthy. So one of the things I kind of wanted to put on the table was that, how do we start to prepare ourselves as the state starts to move to, and before, or the other ways that the state has forced us to be visible or non-visible is through documentation, right? Whether or not we had papers, whether or not we don't have papers. So now one of my biggest concerns as a healthcare, as someone who's in the healthcare, but also as a social justice warrior, is thinking about how is the state going to start to move to try to, figure out who in the community can come out and who in the community can't come out. And then how do we start to either get in front of this, or how do we start to have these conversations, or how do we start to prepare ourselves? Because I know the push is to find out who everybody's positive, but at the same time, I see that as data collection as well. And as this this stamp of who we are and who we aren't. And I don't have an answer for that, but it's something that I'm definitely starting to think about as we start to progressively move towards figuring out who has this virus and who doesn't. So and that's a very clear thought or question, but I just wanted to put it out there to see if other folks are thinking about that in regards to mobility and to movement.
Yes, so but thank you, Jamie. That's so before we open it up, does Chella, Miche, or Wes, do you have any comments on what Jamie just shared around where we're headed? Because particularly, I think this issue of, and Jamie, you speak about it in the context of legibility, that making us legible, making us visible, making us, which really further serves the national security police state from data collection and tracing and tracking people as well. So any thoughts and comments from either one of you, Chella, Miche, or Wes, before we open it up?
Yeah, I would say I definitely need like more research like in that area. And I think like just adding to that, I think as like so many people are switching over to Zoom like this and other online platforms, like those are also areas where we need to be super cautious of, because they definitely are collecting information or can be collecting information from us this way too. And then like that whole Zoom bombing and all that stuff too. So yeah, nothing more to add on that though.
Okay. Wes?
Hey, yeah, I had some thoughts. Jamie, I think we're all thinking about the freedom to move piece. Watching it unfold is like a little surreal. But on that first point of just like where there's a effort to sort of get like larger emergency funding for sex workers is through Scott Wiener's office. So Miche, like that's kind of a conversation that's just started that I don't know if you've talked to him or his staff people, but they're trying to initiate some sex worker like relief package. I don't know much more about it, but yeah, that's like one avenue that's emerging.
Okay. Okay, great. So we're gonna try to unmute everybody. So hopefully we're not gonna get a whole lot of background noise. And then if people can mute themselves, can people mute themselves if it's okay? If people don't mind, just doing that extra click and muting themselves. Because this way, just now we're gonna open it up. Okay. So just if people can mute themselves so we can hold off on the background noise, really appreciate it. And this way we can open it up for, just comments, questions, what we have heard, and just let it be a free flow conversation for the next 45, 50 minutes or so, including strategies how to fight back. So I know that, Chella, you'd said that Jade was going to be on the call too. I don't know, Jade, if you're there. If you maybe you can start off with you, that if you have any thoughts or comments up until what you've heard, you may want to unmute yourself. Try to unmute, Jade. Okay, go ahead. Now you're good.
Starting with the button. Hey y'all. Let's see, how's it going, everyone?
Hey.
It's good to see you.
Hi, Jade.
Hi. Yeah, I'm really thankful. I'm really thankful for the information and I'm wondering, and I'm working with a larger organization, a nonprofit, that I'm wondering how, what are the best ways to connect folks that do have funders that are interested in doing like this radical funding, or ways to kind of flow the money down. And also just like, additional needs of support in terms of mutual aid in Los Angeles, and other avenues that we can plug into. I know that you spoke of some, but.
Other folks, other comments? It's a free flow conversation here.
Yeah. I feel like it can be hard with larger nonprofits to justify for them to just want to like give away money. So like that's been like difficult. I don't know if maybe there would be opportunities, and I'm just like thinking out loud too, like of organizing like I don't know, like online opportunities, like webinars or something, like ways to like hire people or like get people money that way of like you if you know artists or if you know folks that have been struggling to like speak on online platforms, like if your org wants to organize something like that and then funnel money into people that way. I think like if they're not entirely sure like about giving money to individuals, I think being able to trickle it down into like transit organizations and like setting up a call with like myself or other like Isaac or other folks that are connected to transit organizations that would be able to disperse funds to folks that way would be great. And I think like if those types of things, like those super tangible things are difficult too, if like your org has social media platforms or has like some sort of online presence, being able to share a lot of the efforts that are happening from trans orgs too, share like is super, super helpful and can reach like so many more people. So those would be like a couple of ways I would say, like tangible.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe a question for GJLA, Isaac, and if you may want to unmute yourself to respond. Does GJLA have the capacity to take funds if people want to send them and then disperse them to the trans community?
Yes, definitely. And we just got a small rapid response grant that we're figuring out how, like, with our advisory committee, how we want to disperse those funds. And the one thing I just wanted to say in terms of like I think that at the end of the day, people need to really trust trans leadership, trust trans individuals to like not have to tell their sob stories or their like trauma, the whole trauma porn thing, to regurgitate these stories and have to go through all that just to get some funding. So I just wanted to like uplift that in the conversation too. But I do think, yes, to answer your question, yes.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
Please, please. Sure.
I love what you said, Isaac, because that's so real. Like all the 3 applications I filled, 2 of them were trans-based, and they were like, "Why do you need this money? If you don't get this money, what's gonna happen?" And it's like, I'm Black and I'm poor and I'm trans. Just like trust that. Trust that I'm not living in Beverly Hills mansion. Like, I think there's something to be said when we don't trust the community that is one of the communities that are being most affected by the outbreak and the scarcity of shit. Because like, yeah, I just think that. I'm going to mute myself because my neighbor keeps playing music.
Isaac, this is Wes. Isaac, could we stay in like communication? Because we're still trying to figure out how we're practically going to distribute these funds that we raised for our emergency relief fund for like direct payments to people on the street kind of thing. We still need to figure that out. So if we could stay plugged in with you just throughout all this.
Okay. So I think somebody's mic is open and some background noise is going on, whether it's a TV or something like that. I don't know. No, it's not you, Chella. Someone else's mic. Okay. So, there's some very loud conversation going on in background.
With lots of tequilas, no lemon, no salt, because that's not okay.
Hamid, just mute everybody.
But sometimes I have those moments.
Okay, I'm gonna have to mute everybody now. So, okay, cool. I guess the question it goes to where. Okay, so here's the question is that I know that Ground Game is okay supporting other orgs and is trying to center people of color and LGBT folks and groups without like any means testing really needed. I'll be taking the feedback that transnet orgs are suffering back there too. Okay, well, thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for taking this message back to Ground Game LA that, you know, that how there's a particular impact that is going on the trans community as well. So yeah, let me just try unmuting one more time.
As far as I understand, I think I'm going to do a threesome.
Okay, so I think somebody's staying pretty loud. Some background looks like TV. Okay.
Hamid, you can also mute people directly.
Yeah, I could try to do that too. So. Okay, so let me go to, and we can unmute that and see who's unmuted now. So the other question was that I think Gladys had asked in the beginning, and Jamie, that you were reading off, that what can we do to help our fellow trans folks, especially during this pandemic, and how can we help with trans folks who do sex work? So this was a question that was asked. Does any one of you want to respond to that question, Chella or Miche or West?
I guess I can respond. Just sort of, I don't know. Right now, we're just trying to raise money and just we're looking at like, you know, potential larger channels for like statewide relief. I hope that everybody here that cares about that or works with those people like plugs into that. Miche, Chella, Isaac. Yeah, I don't know. Things are definitely going to change. I don't know what else to say about it. It's just I can barely just think about like short term right now. To be honest, I'm not the best person to respond, but.
But
what was the question?
Go ahead, Chella. What was that?
What was the question? I'm so sorry.
It was like, how can non-trans folks help trans folks right now, or support, and particularly trans sex workers?
Well, number one, center us. Number two, check in with your trans and GNC and sex worker comrades. I think there's something to be said when like you're forced in isolation and you feel like nobody cares, right? Sex workers are like completely having to like demand respect. And if you're a trans sex worker, it's even triple that, right? And so I think just showing people that you care through actions. If you got money, send it to them. If you don't got money, if you have something like a friend of mine, just being honest, they didn't have money. They had an extra loaf of bread. That helps. You know, I had another friend that doesn't have money. They took me to a place to get things. You know what I mean? Volunteer your time, volunteer your effort. Now, if you're trying to, like, I just say whatever you can do that you can do, right? Because I don't want you to get, you know, put yourself out, but also like, yeah, support. What about you, Miche?
Miche, you're muted. Let me unmute you.
Okay. Yeah, I would say like very similar. I think like we've been like reiterating like the importance of just keeping us in dialogue and like really centering our experiences in a lot of these response efforts and in a lot of these mutual aid efforts. I think it's really like, you know, if you have trans folks that you follow that are sharing like GoFundMe's or sharing like their like Venmos or Cash Apps, like throw a couple dollars their way. If they got an OnlyFans, like subscribe, like you don't gotta watch their content, but like just like support like their efforts to try to become like to get some money into their bank accounts. And it can be hard like for folks that maybe aren't in community to find those, but I think like this is an opportunity for like us to do that. Like me, like, and a couple of folks on this Zoom right now are really close and have really strong ties with the community, and like we're constantly sharing um, opportunities to share funds with folks and all of that. And so those are like easy, tangible ways, like if you can't go outside and you want to support someone online. And then I know Isaac said, like if you know folks that work for transit organizations like myself or Isaac or other folks, send them grant opportunities or be like, hey, like I saw this and thought of you, and then we'll do our best to be able to send it to other folks too. And so like, I'm just grateful that we were able to open this up and really like, oh yeah, or write that grant for us, yeah, or write the mutual effort, like mutual aid, like application for us, you know? And so, yeah, just really glad that folks were able to get connected, and I'm super down to connect folks to other efforts after this too.
Terrific. Isaac, I think you posted in the chat room about the iPhone or the iPads, and then it says that they're to be looking to distribute those. Can you clarify before? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Texting kind of could be difficult. So yeah, we're looking to receive iPads or technology so that we can then distribute to our members who don't have access to some of our folks come in and use that stuff, but we're not in the office at all anymore. So we want to redistribute that to some of our folks who need access to those things.
Okay. That'll be. Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, you know, I also had a question, and this is kind of coming up a lot just from folks reaching out, but I'm wondering if folks are now starting to build community with folks who are positive and who are being told to self-quarantine at home because their condition is not as severe as needing hospitalization, and what kind of resources are being allocated to them through the hospitals or through, you know, county health. Are people actually having like someone to come check in on them? Is there folks that are knowing how to care and check in on someone who is actually positive and symptomatic? Because what I'm finding out there, for example, I got a phone call from a friend up north because he has a family member in Gardenia, and she lives with a 5-year-old, and she's only 25 herself, is now symptomatic, positive, having to self-quarantine with her 5-year-old, and has been told to call 911 if she's short of breath. So that's kind of, I can only imagine how other, you know, situations are unfolding. In that sense, this is a Black woman. And so my concern is, and I'm trying to slowly I'm having conversation with a task force coming out of UCLA to kind of investigate what are the follow-ups hospitals are having with people who are being told to self-quarantine. So I'm wondering in any of these mutual aid groups, or if folks have, you know, firsthand stories of what kind of, you know, situations they're running up against with folks that they know who are symptomatic and positive and being forced into whatever space they are, and if there's any follow-up that's happening with these people.
Anybody wants to respond to that question? Go ahead, Andrew. You may want to unmute yourself. Oh, hang on a second. Let me try to do that. Okay, now try to unmute. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
go ahead.
Ground Game, or well, Mutual Aid Los Angeles, the broader coalition, does have a series. I'll try and look them up. I don't have them offhand right now, but I'll try and look them up before the end of this call and post them in chat. There are several things about, we've been doing deliveries and such and one of our people who's a wonderful medic made a very extensive, very thorough decontamination protocol, which even if you can't follow it to the letter, like, you know, do the best you can. Yeah, so there have been at least, I've seen several as well circulate around about, you know, ways to deal with making sure at least for deliveries has been the more focus. I don't know of the focus for actual symptomatic folks, but obviously off the top of my head, I'm not a medical professional, but I can say, you know, wear a mask, wear gloves, whatever clothes you have on, you know, leave them in in some clean room to disinfect for at least 3 days, because COVID sticks around for quite a while. Actually, just wash them outright. Soap and water will kill the bacteria. Just wash them. And yeah, if you're doing outreach work to multiple people, like, you know, from the moment you leave your home, leave it with gloves on, and don't take your gloves off until you're back home. Just re-sanitize them constantly with hopefully 90% or 70% isopropyl if you can find it.
Thank you. And I also see that in the chat room, Jessica posted meal train, like train and a meal, MEALTRAIN. Mealtrain.com can be used. And yeah.
Yeah, I think my question's a little more specific, not just so much. I'm wondering for what if people are experiencing positive people that are not being given direct services from the hospital who are positive, who are being told to go home to self-quarantine. I'm more looking to try to expose the system. If it's just sending people home and making them dependent on, you know, a collective of mutual aid, because as a healthcare, you know, professional, you know, part of it is definitely knowing those techniques that you need to have in order to, you know, don and doff material correctly, you know, putting on your protective gear before you go into someone's home, especially if they're positive. But I'm curious if people are knowing people who are going home or being sent home with no follow-up care, if that's actually the case, because I'm hearing stories of that actually being the case, where people are told to go home, self-isolate, and then there is no follow-up that's happening, whereas a nurse is calling them, a doctor is calling them, or if it's just being left in the hands of the community to follow up with positive patients or symptomatic patients. Because I'd like to start collecting these stories and start trying to figure out a way to expose what is happening. But at the same time, as other folks are doing, is build with other groups to be sure that we are taking care of our folks, and definitely centering what we're doing right now on this call is Black trans folks, to be sure that if this is the case, because the city or the county just released the numbers, and we see that the majority of people who are dying of COVID-19 is the Black community. So I think this, and like I said, the call that I did get was in regards to a Black woman. So so I'm really wanting to, you know, so just like everybody else is building power and exposing to find these stories and people that are actually being sent home and with no other follow-up that's going on.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Jamie.
To answer their question, Jamie, I specifically don't know of anyone who's been diagnosed with COVID. I know that happens often with a lot of, with like even non-COVID but threatening illnesses still. But I don't know anyone, to be honest, who yeah, that was a deep question, to be honest.
Yeah, and there are a couple comments in the chat room as well. That one is saying that Kaiser was telling folks to go home 1 week of the crisis, and then Irna also posted that most people I know who are positive have been told to go home with little to no follow-up. One person I know in Boyle Heights and another in New York City had decent experience with their nurse practitioners. I think the need or inquiry to train is valid and it's very much needed. So definitely, Jamie, I think your point is very well taken. And there is, and this is something that as we build, as we monitor, this is something that we'll have to keep an eye on. I want to go back to this other question that Eugene had raised, that if there is any platform available when one can sign up to offer one's services for anyone in need. So is there a central location, for example, is Ground Game accepting like a central location where people can log on and say, yo, I want to offer services to a particular community? Or do you all just put it all into one basket and just sort of like whatever the need is? Because I know that the trans community has its own very unique needs, and so folks need to really, and if people are willing to share, would Ground Game be open to then kind of funnel that in a particular way? Andrew? Hang on a second. Let me just see if I can. Go ahead now, try it.
Yeah, Ground Game, I know we had this conversation at the outset, like we already agreed, communities of color need to be prioritized in that regard. So that's been something we've been doing and had already a few coalition partners from other stuff we had been plugged in with. We haven't been able to do a lot of outreach specifically to communities of color, but for sure, if someone said, hey, I want to especially help trans folks on the application and the link I keep dropping, I'm sure that request would be, I'm sure we would find some way to accommodate that.
Okay. And similar, same question for you, Isaac, with GJLA. Is GJLA equipped to handle these type of requests if some folks want to contribute and want to have this directed? It's almost like a donor directed kind of program. So any thoughts on that? You need to unmute yourself.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I'm actually working on a platform so that people can just send funds directly, and they can say like, exactly how much they want, or even they can even say like what they want it to go towards. So yeah, we do. I can send that out. Maybe I could send that out to you, and you can send that to folks.
Sure, we can definitely, along with this, can post it on the website and can put it, in other forms of social media as well. Okay, cool. Thank you, very much appreciated. So let me just check this new message that showed up. Okay, so maybe Isaac, if you can hang in there for another minute and unmute yourself, I have another question, because one of the things that and this is going to be next Tuesday as well, so it'll be great if you're available, that we are doing our next webinar on the war on youth, how the youth are being impacted particularly. So talking about, you had brought up youth earlier, and talking about the impact, and we know that there's already this kind of these little shades of criminalization happening on youth as well, where one of the newspaper stories were that 40,000 youth are absent, are not even getting online, and then 16,000 youth are constantly absent. And then there's also this issue with teachers trying to load up the students with a whole bunch of assignments and questions. So particularly with trans youth and trans youth of color, how do you see this? It's almost like the impact even grows even more at this time as well. And where there's also a call for physical distancing, and they're going to start monitoring that, and the policing of physical distancing as well. So just want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just like with everything else, it's we were already in crisis and with our communities before this, and now it's just even like at another level, right? So I do think that trans youth are becoming more and more isolated, and I do think that there's a trickle effect that ends up happening. And and unfortunately the call lines are emails, even with GJLA, and we're not even a direct service organization, but our emails, our Facebook messages, social media, Instagram, we have a higher level during this crisis of people needing resources, specifically young people and youth. And so I think it's just a critical time to just even making sure that we are centering the youth with like call centers. Like, I think it's really important for folks who do have capacity to volunteer for, those direct services that are offering, like the teen lines for trans folks, or even like young adults. So I think that's the call volume is higher in these moments, right? And they're already high in general. So I don't know what else to say at this moment, but yeah.
Okay, cool, great. Okay, so folks, any other questions, any other comments from the participants? Thank you for hanging in there. There's been quite a bit of conversation that has happened. Okay, so what I'll do is, yeah, go ahead, Nadia.
Hi, Nadia, with the Stop LAPD Spying as well. I just wanted to say hello and also let folks know that the coalition, Stop LAPD Spying, and in collaboration with Baby Anarchists and Palestinian Youth Movement, we've started a zine. And so with this, really hoping like an ongoing series. Really, the original intention is to actually pass it out. So it looks like Hamid is pulling it up. But basically, it's there's two versions. There's the online version, but as somebody said earlier in the meeting today, that obviously online is very limited and it's not really as connected as we would want it to be to our communities. And so there's two versions, a printable version as well. And kind of lifting what folks were saying today, we want to go deeper for the second issue. We want to go a lot deeper into youth, into issues youth are facing, and we kind of touched on it here. But this is basically just kind of sharing with folks that, hey, this really just stemmed from different community members coming together, because folks were reaching out to all of us in different ways around, well, what's like policing going to look like, what's health going to look like. And so we just basically, through our just sharing knowledge, doing some research, and we'll put this together. So it's for folks to print, it's for folks to share, and also a call out for, because if you look at the bottom, there's a resources page. And so there's definitely a lot that is not on there that I even see folks have already put in the chat, and people have mentioned verbally as well. So definitely soon wanting to come out with the second issue. So feel free to check it out, and share any suggestions, any ideas, any concerns, critiques, however. You can either just send the suggestion to stoplapdspying@gmail.com, or if you want to be part of like actually creating it. But definitely wanted to share that lifting youth and resources that youth can reach out to, and particularly trans youth and youth of color. And so just inviting folks. I know like we're doing a lot, so just wanted to put that out there for y'all to look at, share, and or collaborate on with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia. And then, as you can see, that there's a full printable version here as well. So it is already formatted for printing. So we ask folks that make sure that you do print double side and leave it long edge. It's on landscape. So the minute you print it, it's ready to be folded. And we basically took it out to our communities, shared some of these in Skid Row, and people thought this was really good. And I think just creating a series out of that is definitely a great idea. So happy to So I don't know, Isaac, if folks from GJLA would be down to to partner up as we bring out the one on youth, and then so any questions, any comments, any thoughts?
Real
Yeah.
quick on that, one more thing. For the War on Youth meeting next Tuesday, we'll probably dedicate a good chunk of the time to actually just coming up and creating some content for the next one. So just as an FYI.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. So I'm just going to take this out, see that there's some more chat room questions as well.
Hamid, folks are asking if we can post the link in the chat box.
Oh, sure, definitely. So here it is. Let me just go right there. Let me just go there. I'm still stuck on this private message. How do I get back into?
Just go to 2 and then click the little button to everyone. Or the little arrow down.
I don't know how to do that. Where's the arrow in there?
Okay, I can work on trying to get the link up there, or if Nadia, if you want to try.
Yeah, I can do it.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so as Nadia is doing that, yes, the power not paranoia piece. Okay, so as Nadia does that, any other comments or questions from folks for Chella or Miche or West? Yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to say for Isaac and Miche and West, I am a nurse, so I don't know how many healthcare providers you all are connecting with that are, if folks are coming in and having questions about symptoms or anything like that, I definitely would love to just drop my email and and be able to connect you with my phone number if there are any kind of healthcare things that are coming up. That I can assist with at all. I'm not putting out too much of my services for everyone because I work on a cancer unit as well. So they're trying to protect our unit and keep it what they call quote unquote a clean unit from COVID patients. But I do want to stay in touch with folks that are looking out for the medical well-being of folks that they know that are starting to having to self-isolate, what symptoms to look for, what a fever looks like, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're not already building with folks, I would definitely love to stay in touch to see how I could build with you or even bring resources towards that may not be already coming that way, and figure out, just at least start having those conversations.
Awesome. Awesome. Great. Thank you, Jamie. So looks like folks are exchanging information as well. So any other thoughts, any other comments? I'm just going to bring it back to Chella and Miche and West, is that if you, as we close out this webinar, if you all have any thoughts or any comments, any suggestions of what you've heard, and any. Yeah.
No, just thank you all to, listening to us talk for like an hour and a half. Hope it wasn't too much. And grateful for folks for sharing so many resources. I know I learned a lot. I hope everyone learned a lot also. And thanks so much, Chella, for asking me to be a part of it.
Thank you. Chella, any comments, any thoughts? I think you're muted. Okay, we can go to West. West, anything you want to add?
Just thank you, everyone, for coming together. And yeah, this is going to be like a long term. Like I said earlier, I can really just think of this short term right now, but the medium and long term impacts and the amount of coordination it's going to take among all of us is going to be significant. So, it's really great that we're strengthening this community network now. I appreciate and love all of you and hope you're all well.
Absolutely. Jamie, any comments?
No, I think I said everything. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, folks. So this is obviously one of the key reasons that we have been doing this is because of the disruption that has been caused for our street organizing and being out in the community. And there's a whole bunch of still, some of us are old school organizers, believing in door knocking and things like that. So a lot of this has come to almost like a state of suspension. But I think it's also crucial that this is the time that we remain extra vigilant. This is the time that the disruption can lead to neutralization of movements, and really kind of creating more distance. That's why, rather than social distancing, we need to maintain that physical distance and maintain and work towards social closeness and our own sort of social solidarity. So, so with that, for the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, we remain committed. We're also monitoring the police commission meetings. They are having those on Tuesdays by Zoom and through the internet as well. So stay connected, please, and stay healthy. This will be uploaded. Hopefully, we're trying to get these recordings turned into a YouTube video. And we also have a community member up in the Bay Area doing some really awesome note taking as well with the graphics. So we're going to be posting all of that stuff over the weekend. The last two meetings were really good. And I think one of the key pieces that came out over the last two meetings last week was that how we need to be really looking at public health and this notion of public health as a major tool for the police state. That how public health has always been used to criminalize, to demonize, to pathologize, and to trace, track, and monitor community members as well. So stay healthy, stay safe. And then next Tuesday is going to be our webinar. I believe next week we may have two on Tuesday and Thursday. We'll see, but stay tuned because we want to bring back our work with folks in public health, particularly the folks who are doing work with the COVID-19 task force on race and equity. So there's a whole sort of narrative development over there. So thank you all very much, and love you, Chella, and love you, Miche, and love you, West. Much appreciated. This was super informative, and we look forward to continue building. So have a good night and be safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.